Hi, and welcome to a quick video about how vaccines work and how they trigger our bodies to kick in an immune response to be able to fight the virus in the future. So here's a virus, and we're going to be focusing on the coronavirus, COVID-19. And in all viruses, you'll see that they have a code inside. And in the coronavirus, it's mRNA, which are the instructions to build every piece of this virus you see. In our bodies, we have something called DNA, which is our code on how to build every single thing in our body. So specifically, we really want to learn about the thumbprints of the virus because that's how your body identifies a pathogen, something, an invader coming into you. We we first send our white blood cells out there to first identify, oh, who's good, who's bad. And this is the part. So if we can identify the RNA that is responsible for building the thumbprints, these things called spike proteins or antigens on the outside of the cell, then we really are on the right path. And this was done in China early on. We mapped out the genome for this, the code. And from then, everyone has been working on trying to find out who is responsible, what part of this mRNA is responsible for building these spike proteins. Well, we can celebrate now because we now have vaccines from Pfizer, BioNTech, and Moderna using the RNA from the virus. So they've taken this RNA strand and they've copied it over and over and put it inside of a lipid layer. And that's essentially what the vaccine is now. So it can train our body how to just build this piece, have nothing to do with the whole virus, just build the thumbprints to train our immune system to be prepared for that thumbprint. Anytime we see it, we can attack it. Now, we're going to walk through that process next. We should also note that there are other companies working with a slightly different way to make a vaccine, and that would be using an adenovirus. It's a pre-existing virus, but putting the code of this mRNA that builds the spike protein, squeezing it in with the DNA of a pre-existing virus. And that's another way to build an immunity or a vaccine. We're going to focus on the RNA method up here by Pfizer and Moderna. So here we go. We have the vaccine out now, and the vaccine then gets sent off around the world, kept very cold, and then gets injected into somebody. So now we have the injection coming, and here it comes. And once that RNA is introduced into our cell, now this blue cell represents a human cell, and that RNA never gets into contact with your nucleus. This RNA vaccine from BioNTech and Moderna, it goes to something called ribosomes, which are those little sandwiches, and it builds then anything it's instructed to. Our ribosomes will build anything you tell them to build. So the RNA then goes there and builds a red spike protein over and over and over and over because you take that vaccine. And those red spike proteins then get presented on your cell. They're small proteins, and they get sent out, pieces of them get sent out throughout your body. Now, what does that do? Well, there's a three-step process. Now we're in the immune response part of this. You have over 20 something white blood cells in your body, but we're going to look at three different white blood cells. So we have a phagocyte, the big slow tanks. That's the gray blob you see on the screen here. And then we're going to be looking at a helper T cell, which are ones that communicate with the phagocytes and say, oh, what did you catch? And then they send off a message to the factories, the B cells. So phagocytes, the big ones, T cells, the communicators and the fast ones, and then the B cells, which are the factories producing the weaponry to kill the virus. So we'll go through that here. Here's the phagocyte capturing up those thumbprints, those spike proteins that we've instructed our bodies to build. And now it grabs on and says, aha, this is something new. This is a thumbprint out there. I don't know what this is. I better learn about it and get prepared to fight this thing because this looks like an invader. So there's a very interesting image on the right of actually a real phagocyte attacking a bacteria. And it's actually a pathogenic bacteria. So it's looking at the proteins on the outside of that bacteria and saying, I don't know what you are. I don't know what you are. Get over here. You shouldn't be in the body. I need to capture you and teach these T cells what you are so they can go and instruct factories to build an immune response. So here it goes, and they capture it up. There's a real video from, you can see it on the edge here, from Boston University and U.Conn, two professors there that captured this actually happening in real life. And my favorite picture down here as well of the real thing happening, colored up obviously, but that's it. That's a big phagocyte attacking a foreign invader here. And now the helper T cell sees this and communicates and says, oh my gosh, you caught this? What is it? And then quickly runs off to our B cells. Remember, there's three. There's the phagocyte, the slow ones, the T cells, the communicators, and then they go to the B cells. Now, these are the really interesting guys. The B cells now see it and say, I need to really build a quick army, something called antibodies. And that's the whole goal of this whole picture, is to have antibodies out there. So the B cells look at what the T cell's talking about, give the interior of the B cell, these proteins inside, instructions on how to build antibodies. And those biologists out there, that's endoplasmic reticulum, with a lot of the rough endoplasmic reticulum, a lot of ribosomes in there, building and packaging a lot of proteins. The proteins that they build and package are antibodies. So a lot of these get spit out into the body, these antibodies down here, and also latched onto any cells that now have the spike proteins in them. There's one other player we didn't really mention. It's a sort of the vacuum cleaner of the body, the killer T cells going out there to vacuum up any messy pieces and any dead cells that need cleaning up in this process. So it's a lot to think about, but this is the speed version versus the 20-something white blood cells in our immune system. So I'll summarize it again. We have the phagocytes. They capture those proteins that we have instructed our body to build. We're not instructing our body to build a new virus. We're instructing our body to build the thumbprints of the virus. So these phagocytes now see those thumbprints and they freak out and they capture them and display them. They send the message over to the helper T cells, or actually rather the helper T cells find them. They're always communicating with them and say, oh my God, look what you have. And the helper T cells communicate to the B cells and say, guys, we have this thing in here that's an invader. Produce antibodies, get out there, capture it, fix it. And now your antibodies are going to attack. Your killer T cells are also working at it as well. They're working nice and quick to clean up, to attack. But really, it's the antibodies we're after here. And the antibodies, they capture on as soon as you get the real virus. So if you are vaccinated and you come into contact, you breathe in the coronavirus and it gets into your body, you're going to have antibodies already. And those antibodies are prepared. They go right at it and they stick on all over that spike protein. Now, what you see down here, they're sticking onto the spike protein. And if you essentially stick onto all the spike proteins, the virus won't have anywhere to latch onto your body and won't have anywhere to inject its own information into our body and make us sick. So it'll just sort of sit around there until it's just kind of done and lives out its existence and falls apart. Now, why do you need two vaccines? That's a common question out there. A lot of vaccines work this way because our bodies, we only have so much space inside to store all these antibodies and to store these B cells who are activated. So oftentimes our bodies will say, okay, well, I fought that sickness. There's no point in hanging out anymore. I'm taking up space. So they fade off and make room for other white blood cells to move around our bloodstream. So we want to have a memory of this because this one's the real deal, right? So we get the first injection and our immune response kicks in and it starts to fade off. All those fighters start to fade off. Those antibodies and the B cells start to fade off. But then we trick our bodies and we give it a second injection, a second vaccine saying, here's more of those thumbprints. Pretend viruses. They're not real viruses. They're just the proteins. So here's more in the second injection. And you have some B cells out there still producing antibodies saying, oh my God, this is the real deal. So they kick in, put out a lot more antibodies the second time and very quickly, and they stick around. We're called memory B cells. So they stick around now, and that's eventually called immunity. Okay, I hope this video helped you learn a little bit about how a vaccine is developed and how it can trigger our immune system to build immunity. So thank you for watching and good luck out there. Stay safe.